All right, so in the last tutorial, we just talked a little about some very basic lighting and baking lighting as a way of saving memory. So we can bake it out to light map texture. If you remember, we go to bake lighting and then we can see it here. Another way that we can preview this in our scene is if you want to see what's baked, remember this is baked means rendered to a texture. We have these options up here, which allow us to see baked lighting, directional. We can see the wireframe of our scene, shaded. If we turn on baked lighting, you can see it's going to show you all the areas that have some sort of baked lighting. So all of these walls have a little bit bouncing off. And then we really have these two from our spotlight and then our light there. Now, there's another way to save memory, and it has to do with something called a light probe. And light probes are a way of like gathering light data within a certain group. And you have these little light probe circles, and it comes from the film industry. And it really makes your baked light more realistic because you can interact with our character. Let's just, with a lot of things in Unity, you can explain it, and that's cool, but you kind of glance over. And but in reality, what we want to do is we want to just go ahead and set this up. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. So the way we create a light probe is, and I thought I made a container just for the light probes in my scene. Let's see. This is the furniture, so let's put this in room assets. Let's see, let me go ahead and create another one just to be safe. All right, so here's like our lighting container, and I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to go down to light, and I'm going to go to light probe group, and I'm just going to move this group out here for, well, let's see, we get a lot of, let's build up some light probes inside of this patio area. You could see that our light probe is organized as a series of these little circles or probes. And so these are our probes, and by default, when you create one, you have 8 of these little individual light probes. And because it's in 3D, it's called a 3D volume. Now, we can also edit this light probe. So let's say I'm going to set up a light that is sort of in the middle here, and I want to store that data in this light probe, and I want to delete it later. We can go in the inspector here, and you can see we can click on Edit Light Probes, and we can add, we can delete, all that stuff. But I can also hold Shift and select these, or drag a marquee and sort of pull them out a little bit to edit the shape of the light probes. If we add a probe, you can see it added one light probe here. We can also duplicate the selected light probes by selecting all of these, and then hit Duplicate Selected. And as we move them out, you can see that they're connected. So now as we enter areas like this, if we want to make certain areas that affect our character as we enter this light probe, so say we want our character to cast a red light to sort of, if we're making a horror game or something, we can adjust the path of our light probe like this. I'm going to undo that for a second because I don't want to get this overly complicated. And if you unedit it, you can just kind of move it over. So we're just going to place this over the word patio. Now, actually, what I'd like to do is, let's just duplicate, let's select all of this, and let's actually duplicate it a little bit and just add more light probes here, because the more that we have, the better the essentially the quality of the lighting is. So we're storing more lighting data in each one of these probes. So I'm going to select these, and again, same thing before. I'm going to duplicate selected, and so I'm going to add a pretty good amount of these light probes right down the middle here, like that. Now, I want to actually show you something too. I don't know if you're noticing this. We have a light that goes down here, and we get a little bit of bounce light onto this green wall. So what I'd like to do is maybe make a red carpet here. So I'm just going to go to Tools, Pro Builder window, go New Shape, and then make sure that I select the plane. I'm going to drag a plane across the bottom here. I'm rolling my wheel out a little bit. And then I'm just going to use vertex colors. So actually, I think if I select the whole thing, I could still apply. Yeah, so there's a vertex color. Now recall that we do have a light probe set up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a very basic light. Let's see. Well, here. let me just show you how these light probes react as our character enters that area. Actually, here, let me make this play focused. So as I walk in, their door opens. And what's going to happen is the light probe, as we set this up, is going to adjust itself based on the positioning of the character. And we want it to cast some baked lighting onto our character. So this is like simulated artificial lighting. And as our character steps out of the room here, it'll return to the normal lighting in the scene. All right, so let's select all the floor that we just created and make sure all the walls are marked as static. Because remember, if we're baking anything, and these doors we're not going to have open, we want to draw our character into this door here. Let's just make sure we mark this wall static, and this is static. So now the lighting, anything that's marked static, the lighting will, the baked lighting can affect it because it's saying we're not moving. But remember, the point of the light probe is we have objects in our scene that are dynamic. That means they move, and we still want that baked lighting to affect it, and that's what's stored inside this light probe. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure that our sun is also static. Or say, make sure that's marked as static. And then what I'm going to do is let's go to lighting and then just take a look at what the general baked lighting, because we have lighting in our scene now. I'm going to turn on auto generate so that it's always updating this light map. And you'll know down here at the bottom, depending on how much time it takes, you'll have this little bar at the bottom of your screen here. And that's going to be how long it takes. Now we might have to, I'll have to make a video on how to optimize this because I have a pretty powerful system, which might be a little bit faster depending on, than yours, depending on how complex your lighting setup is. All right, so now we have our baked lighting. Here's our map updated. You'll see right off the bat, we do have some lighting bouncing onto our wall. See how this wall has got this pinkish tint, this one as well, this one here. And if we look at our map, if we go back here and we change this to baked lighting, you can see that little red area that we did vertex coloring is bouncing that red from the sun onto the floor. And so, so right off the bat, we are getting some nice bounce light, and it makes the scene look more realistic, especially if you have like wallpaper texture. Like we're actually getting, if you look in here, we're getting some browns bouncing off of here. We're still getting some reds in here, which is interesting. Now, the thing is, as I mentioned, even though we have all this nice baked lighting in, it doesn't work for our character, right? Like you have to mark things static to bake the lighting. And our main player here, this guy, if we look at him, he's not static. And we can't mark him as static because he isn't going to be static, which means he's going to be walking around our scene. We want him to be able to like walk into this room. It's kind of hard to drive from looking at this top screen. All right, so let's take a look at how we can visualize. So I'm going to go ahead and change this up a little bit so we can see a difference in color. So with my floor selected, I'm going to go to Tools, Pro Builder Window, Pro Builder Window. And if you go to Vertex here, I'm going to select these verts. What you can do is if you don't see it, is you can select an edge, like if yours doesn't have an extra count, and then you could just go here and do Insert Edge Loop, and it'll add a loop. And you can just add some cuts. But what I'd like to do is maybe select these vertexes here and go to vertex color and then maybe select green, maybe a little bit brighter green. I'm going to move that over just a little bit, just so we have some updated lighting. Now, if you don't see, there's a way to visualize what light probe is doing what. If you go to your light probe group here and you go under lighting and you go to your scene, down at the bottom under workflow settings, you could see light probe visualization. If you do only probes used by selection, when we turn that off, as our character enters the scene, I'm going to go ahead and press, let's turn on auto generate, and that way it's always updating our probe. So now you can see it updated our scene with new baked lighting information. Now we have green here. As my character walks in, it looks like we have some light probes clipping the floor. Let's see. You want to make sure that it's always in the floor. I mean, outside of the floor, and not touching anything. That's, yeah, there we go. Because that means that the data is disrupted. So let's go ahead and walk in this way. And let's see, what's up with our visualization? All probes, no cells. Let's see. And there we go. All probes with cells. Let's see. We should be seeing our probes. Only probes used by selection, maybe? Let's try something. I'm going to make a sphere. Could be something that's marked here. Let's move this up. Yeah, you can see here that as we move our sphere around, it shows what's reacting to what. I'm going to go ahead and hit a focus on this. And as I cross over this way, let me make this, let me add a material really quick that's white so you could see this, the light bouncing off the bottom. I'm just going to delete this material later. So as I move this probe, notice that it's taking into account some of that color bouncing off the ground. See how it's a little bit more red here, and then it becomes more green here? So it's actually casting that information. Now, when I exit this room, you could see we don't get any of that information. Well, we got to get away from that light probe a little bit more. You could see, well, I guess it's still holding on to it as I'm in the shadow. But as we get further away, you lose that data. And remember, we don't have any lighting. It's just taking that texture, the bounce lighting from the floor information, and it puts it up here. We don't actually have a light that's casting any green or whatever. So let me go ahead and delete this, and let's see if we can get our main character to affect some of the lighting. So if we go in here, let's open the door. We are getting that light information. It's just because of the shape of our character, because this happens automatically, and your character doesn't necessarily need to be static. So as long as they're in this, yeah, here we go. So because I didn't have the geometry selected, we couldn't see that light probe information affecting the character, but now we can. So let's so it looks pretty cool. I'm getting some red, some green on my guy now. And as I walk into this room, so this is kind of a nice way. And remember, if we bake out other lights like orange or whatever, we can now have baked lighting maps affect our characters as he runs around our scene and discovers all this cool stuff.